Yo, 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 what up, y'all? It's your boy Fro. Happy Frotober 2025 as we come to a close. But today I'm going to be talking about the 2008 film Quarantine. So ain't nothing to it but to review it. Now, I know there's an audience out there who's not a fan of this film and they would much prefer the original Spanish flick Wreck. But I gotta say, I've always been a fan of Quarantine. I've always found this one to be entertaining. I really enjoyed it in the theater when I saw it in 2008. And I would actually have a couple copies on DVD through the years. We're introduced to Angela, who's a reporter, played by Jennifer Carpenter, who some might recognize from The Exorcism of Emily Rose, and her cameraman Scott, played by Steve Harris, who plays the abusive husband in Diary of a Mad Black Woman. Random nerdy trivia. At the start of the film, they're hanging out with some firefighters who are joking back and forth and even making bets on who gets to sleep with Angela at the end of the night. And one of the lead firefighters, I'm trying to remember his name real quick. Sorry, guys. His name, Jake, played by Jay Hernandez, who I know from the Hostel films. And he's one of the more rather likable firefighters, and even his friend Fletcher. They get called over to a Los Angeles apartment building, and that's when we're introduced to the residents that live there. There's an African couple who don't speak English, a veteran doctor named Lawrence, played by Greg Gurman, and one of the more familiar faces, Columbus Short, who plays a hot tempered cop here named Danny. But everybody finds themselves in the same boat when the apartment gets completely locked and shut down by the CDC outside. There's a scene where Jake, our lead fireman, Danny the cop, Angela, and the cameraman Scott climb upstairs. They go to an apartment and they find a really old creepy lady with foam spewing out of her mouth named Mrs. Espinoza. And this is the first case of an attack where she charges one of the cops, takes a big, huge, meaty chunk out of his neck, and they're forced to gun her down. We don't exactly get to see what happens to Fletcher, Jake's best friend, the other firefighter, but there's a really effective jump scare, in my opinion, that gets me every time, where out of nowhere, Fletcher completely splats onto the ground a couple stories high, and we see the bone sticking out of his leg, and it's pretty gnarly. We see that Fletcher has the same symptoms that Mrs. Espinoza had, and when Lawrence the vet puts two and two together, he comes to realize that these are very hardcore cases of what seems to be rabies. He says the state of confusion, the high temper, the foam out of the mouth, the salivary glands, etc. Not verbatim, but he says everybody's connected and they're having these symptoms. There's two other residents named Bernard and Sadie, and it's a little bit implied that they're in a relationship, but Bernard is an opera teacher from what I remember. Sadie is one of his students. They grab Angela and Scott, bring them upstairs, and there's a sequence where they're all watching the television together of the news of what's reporting outside of the building, and we hear lies. They pretty much say everybody's been evacuated already, the chief of police, from what I remember. But eventually the CDC does pop inside the building, guns in hand, and they're there to take a brain sample out of the subjects that have been infected with the virus. And I really like this scene. It's really chaotic because Angela and Scott are trying to find a position to get a clear shot of what's happening inside the operating room. And when they do, all hell breaks loose, and the subjects, Fletcher particularly, who's handcuffed, gets up, transforms, and bites the hell out of one of the CDC members. I always thought that it was a bit messed up how the vet doctor was trapped inside the room, and they were trying to get him out, Angela and Scott, but the CDC guy's saying, nope, he was bitten. And Lawrence is like, I wasn't bitten, and turns out that he was lying because he transforms almost immediately. We have a mother named Kathy and her little daughter, Brianna, and I believe this is Joey King's film debut because she's really young here. But the entire time when everybody's downstairs together, Brianna's having a fever and it's running sky high, but the mother's just claiming it's something to brush past and it's nothing to worry about. Until a pretty decent jump scare yet again where the daughter completely turns and takes a big chunk out of the mother's cheek. I can never say this actor's name, but Rade Serbadija. I butchered the hell out of that. But I thought he was a great actor in here. He plays an older guy named Yuri, who I believe is Russian in this film. And he actually helps our characters, Angela and Scott, quite a bit, especially before he goes out. One of my favorite scenes is when all of our characters are trapped inside of a room near the finale, and Bernard, in frustration, he takes out a knife, cuts down a sheet that leads to outside, and we discover snipers on the roof outside pointing directly at the apartment building. When they score a headshot with Bernard, they blow his brains out. And Sadie in the corner, meanwhile, is bitten and trying to hide it until blood starts pouring down her hand. And while this is going on, the surviving CDC member is barricaded in another room when he's revealed to be bitten as well. And he breaks through the glass door in a chain reaction, bites Yuri. Then Sadie springs up and attacks Yuri's wife. And I always liked how the sequence was filmed. It really keeps me on my edge of my seat. The cop Danny at first is really reluctant and standoffish against Scott and the camera and them filming in the first place. But when we get close to the end, he starts to warm up until he finally bites the bullet when they discover the little girl Brianna is infected and she's hiding upstairs in the apartment. And in a really dumb moment, I gotta say, Danny gets really close and says, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" He turns his neck enough for her to bite the hell out of it. I always rolled my eyes at this part. But I will say Columbus Short does put in a good performance as one of the infected. And actually everybody does. They are rather creepy in their movements and their vocalization, and they portray rage very well. Our last three survivors are Angela, Scott, and Jake. Man, Angela's completely losing her shit. She's breaking down. Scott's trying to hold her together. The zombified Sadie pops up. She jumps on Angela and almost bites her to the point where Angela is convinced that she's bitten. And there's a really cool shot that I always liked where the camera stays at leg level and we don't see what's happening on the top. And Sadie, the zombified Sadie's getting strangled to death by Jay until her neck snaps and we see her legs dangling. And I always thought it was a creepy shot that always gives me the ick. Through the last 15 minutes or so, zombies are constantly piling on Jake and he's kicking ass and it looks like he's going to make it through. Until he finally dies, he gets his neck ripped out. We're left with Angela and Scott, who head down to the basement where Yuri gave them access to his keys after they were searching in his apartment, and he says that it leads to the basement. They find themselves trapped inside, and they're looking through old recordings and newspaper clippings of a doomsday cult and some mysterious virus called the Armageddon virus from the top of my head. The lights start to go out, and we have a really creepy sequence where Angela and Scott are roaming through the dark and they don't know where they're going. Scott has the camera light on and it turns into night vision. We hear scattering around and we see a very thin, pale man, played by Doug Jones, who's one of my favorite actors and one of the makeup legends. He's searching around for them while Angela and Scott are doing their very best to keep quiet and not draw any attention to themselves. And this is when Scott, the cameraman, gets killed when the pill man beats him to death with the hammer. Angela's crawling around, whimpering in night vision. She picks up the camera, sees the thin man eating Scott's face. The man charges at Angela. And this is my biggest problem with the film. The poster is the last 10 seconds of the film. When Angela gets dragged off into the darkness, we go to end credits. So I've always had a big gripe with how the poster completely spoils the ending. I feel like I'm not alone. Like there have been a couple Reddit forums and even IMDb message boards back in the day where people were arguing about how the poster completely spoiled everything. But I gotta say I'm on that side. I think it was a very dumb marketing move. And from what I understand, it wasn't intentional. I think it was the studio side that actually did it. So if I were the Dowdle brothers, I would be pissed. Another nitpick I have is maybe I would have liked just a little bit more explanation on the virus, because after reading the IMDb trivia, you can speed up the recording that's played at half speed in the film that's very low and really growling and menacing. And there is a message in there, but it's really vague still. It's ambiguous to me. To give credit, they do say that the virus in the apartment started from a dog named Max, who happened to be the mother Kathy's dog and the little girl Brianna. But if there are newspaper clippings and speculation of the virus happening before the apartment, I would have liked to see how it originated. Wrapping it up for the TikTok short. I've always enjoyed Quarantine. I know some people out there don't like it and would much rather prefer the Spanish original film Rec, and I can understand. I do think that one is a technically better made film, but I've always had entertainment value with Quarantine. I think we have solid acting from Jennifer Carpenter, Steve Harris, Jay Hernandez. The supporting cast does a decent job. I do like the appearance of the infected and how bugged out they look. And I love the chase sequences when they're hauling ass after Angela or Scott. And I even like the use of practical effects with the blood and gore, which I think aren't over the top at all. But there are one or two moments that make me cringe in an effective way, like Fletcher getting up from the operating table and walking on his broken leg while it's completely sticking out like a broken tree branch. Again, my biggest problem is the ending and the connection with the poster, which completely spoils it 100%. The movie is an hour and 29 minutes, so it's rather short, and it does run by pretty quick. I'm not the biggest fan of remakes, but Quarantine is one that I can really put on every Halloween or just have a bucket of popcorn and just kill some time. I'm gonna give Quarantine an 8 out of 10. And that's it, y'all. It's your boy Fro. What did you think about this movie? Did you like it? Did you hate it? Do you despise it? Do you prefer the original much more? Do you like it as much as I do? Comment below. Let me know your thoughts. In the meantime, between time, I'm on to the next review. Happy Frotober 2025. And thank you guys for watching. Like and subscribe. It helps your boy's channel. And my Patreon is in my description box for anybody that wants to follow the behind the scenes of Fro. I have merch in my description box as well. New Thizzle review shirts. Enough advertising. Good night. Much love.